Just decided to mix things up just a little bit. Gonna do Sunday school from up here, but we'll see. So Genesis 21 this morning. Genesis 21, and we are. It's interesting looking over my lessons. Tonight we're dealing with the idea of in tonight's service at least. We're dealing with the idea of conflict, and what do we do about conflict? Last week we were looking at the idea of those times where, hey, mind your own business, and we kind of dealt with that aspect last Sunday night. And so last Sunday night was mind your own business, and this Sunday night is going to be the idea of pay attention to other people's business. And we're trying to find the balance between those two, because again, if you get all up in other people's business all the time, you're basically a busybody and a gossip. But then also, if you neglect everybody else's business, then that's negligent. There are things you have to deal with. So we're trying to thread that needle. We're trying to walk that line and say, okay, here's how we approach this. Here's the balance that we have to deal with. This morning, we are going to be dealing here in Genesis chapter 21. And since we were dealing with conflict tonight, I decided to actually alternate the two lessons I had planned. And I'm going to do the second one first and the first one next week. Because what I want to do is I want to really zoom in on this idea of how do we deal with conflict. And it was funny because I'm looking over my notes going, oh, the next lesson in Genesis is Abraham dealing with a conflict. And so what I want to do is I want to look at that. And so we're just going to kind of swap the order on these for this morning. And then, of course, in Mark this morning, we're looking at the idea of Jesus' temptation in the wilderness and how that all ties in with some of these things. So this is a very conflict-filled Sunday. I hope you guys can handle it. Hopefully the conflict stays just in the scriptures and what we're studying and doesn't deal with anything outside. But these things apply across the board. I don't know if you've ever dealt with that where you've had to thread that needle of going, is this a conflict I get involved in or not? And I know personality-wise, some of us are the type who, we walk by and we're going to kick every little thing we see. Every stone we see on the street, we're going to kick it. Others of us, we're like, you know what, I'm just going to leave that one alone. And so we really do, every one of us kind of have a personality that either lends itself to, I'm just going to jump right in and get into that conflict. And then others of us are, I just don't want to get involved. And we've got to realize that we don't have to fight every battle we see. And we also do have to sometimes fight battles. So there is a balance we have to have here. But the wisdom comes in saying, how do I discern what is a battle worth fighting? How do I know whether I'm fighting a wrong battle? And then once I have to get involved in a battle, how do I do it the right way? So Lord willing, as we go through this Sunday, and it's this conflict Sunday, I guess, unofficial theme. But as we deal with the conflict here, how do we do this well? How do we navigate these conflicts appropriately? Because let's face it, there are some conflicts we can't avoid. There are conflicts that come, it's plopped right into our lap, and we go, I don't want this. And God goes, no, you're dealing with this. Okay? And I want to come back to something, and David Hedger actually said it as we were wrapping up last week, and it's the idea of the audience of one. And I want to build off of this concept because I believe if we can get this concept down, it's going to solve a ton of our problems. And the audience of one, the idea of this is, who are we doing this for? So if you choose not to get involved in a conflict because it's none of your business, probably somewhere, if you're doing this the right way, somewhere in that conflict, you said, this is not going to be pleasing to God for me to get involved here. So I'm not going to get involved. There's nothing I can help with. It is simply a matter of pride that I would insert myself into this situation. On the other hand, there are conflicts that we have to grab by the horns. There are conflicts in our marriage. There's conflicts in our family. There's conflicts at our work, whatever. We are given responsibilities by God, and it is our way to honor Him to deal with a conflict. We can't run away. And I think about this. I mean, you think, again, if you've raised kids, you understand. You can't just run away from a conflict with your kids. That's not the way God has designed it to be handled. I mean, I know you could, but it's not the right way. And so, but there are things where you're looking at that going, that child annoys me. That child frustrates me. I don't want to deal with this child anymore. I'm just going to, okay, someone else. No. God has put them in your care, your responsibility. In order to honor God, you have to deal with this. The other thing could be your marriage. There could be a conflict in your marriage that is festering to the point that you look at this conflict and you say, if this conflict continues another year, another few months, hopefully not another few weeks, otherwise that's the product of a lot of neglect. But you could see where you're looking at this thing going, if this problem continues for a little bit longer, this is going to end in divorce or worse. Like, what is going on? Okay, that is a conflict you can't avoid. That is a conflict you've got to take by the horns and you've got to deal with, because to honor God, you need to honor your marriage vows and take care of that problem. If you've been given a responsibility at work, you're a manager, you're a boss, whatever, there are conflicts you do not have the opportunity to run away from. You know, I remember we were at camp one time, and someone kept stealing money from the till. And so every time that there would be a Z that was put out, and we'd be processing through the paperwork and be like, we're missing $20. We're missing $20. We're missing 20, like somebody's stealing money from our cash register. What's going on? And so one of the guys, he installed a security camera directly above the cash register, pointing right down. And they started trying to narrow down who did this. You know, and sometimes you figure it out, sometimes, but you don't have the option to go, I don't want to offend anybody. I'm just going to let them keep stealing. No, that's got to be dealt with, because again, not only are you losing money and being a bad steward, but what are you teaching that person by saying, oh yeah, go ahead, keep stealing. You'll get away with it. No, you've got to deal with some of these conflicts. And so like I said, last week in Proverbs when we were studying, we are looking at it going, there are some issues you have to say, this isn't my business. And you just leave it alone, you focus on what you need to focus on. But Lord willing, today, as we go through this idea, we're going to say, God has given me responsibilities. God has put me in situations where I have to butt heads with someone else. Now, the Bible says only by pride cometh contention. So there is a way to do this that hopefully will not lead to contention. It'll say things like a soft answer turns away wrath. And so there is a way that you can deal with this where escalating the situation will make it worse. And I want to look at it because as we're going through the book of Genesis, we come upon a conflict between two men who don't mean to be enemies. They're not trying to go out of their way to hate each other. They happen to be two guys who are living nearby. We saw this with Abram and Lot. There were so many people that literally started fighting each other over real estate, and they said, we need to split ways. And so they parted ways, and that's how they solved that problem. Now Abraham is living in an area, and he's butting heads with another guy, and he's got to deal with the conflict in a different way. So with Lot, he had to part ways and say, hey, we've got herds. We can't just decide to compromise and say your herd eats that blade of grass and my herd eats that blade of grass. That wasn't a viable solution to their problem. They literally, because of the nature of their business, they had to separate ways so they could have separate pasture lands. That is one way to solve conflict. Get out of there. But you'll notice, Abram had no, think about it, like marital commitments or family commitments. He did not need to stay with Lot, okay? It wasn't like Abraham was splitting from Sarah because he's like, hey, your herds are bigger than my herd, let's split. No, that wasn't what he was doing. He was splitting with someone who he was able to split with. Now, Abraham is in a foreign territory. It's a land that's been promised to his descendants, so technically it's his, but not yet. And I want you to see this because as we get here, Abraham just had Isaac, so the fulfillment of the promise has come. But I want you to start noticing this as we read down through this. And again, there's going to be some interesting conflicts that we'll go over next week, Lord willing, in just that. But I want you to hop down, and we're going to see the end of chapter 21. And so, again, Genesis chapter 21. And let's start out in verse number 21. Okay? So Genesis 21, verse 21. And I want to unpack this type of conflict now. And Lord willing, we'll look at another conflict next week, which is, again, they're both very interesting conflicts. But look at this. It wraps up the previous story. Okay? So Genesis 21, verse 21. It says, and he dwelt in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took him a wife out of the land of Egypt. So it's kind of wrapping up Ishmael's story. And so that's the connection point, is Abraham just had to send Ishmael away. So that was one way of dealing with the conflict, and that we've dealt with that previously, but we're going to dig into it more next week. But then verse 22. So Isaac is born. We're now in this time period where Isaac is alive, Ishmael's gone, Hagar's gone. So a lot of the conflict points are taken care of. And now Abraham is living there going, okay, I'm living in the land, what do I do now? Genesis 21 verse 22. And it came to pass at that time that Abimelech and Sychol, the chief captains of the host, spake unto Abraham, saying, God is with thee in all that thou doest. Now therefore swear unto me here by God, that thou wilt not deal falsely with me, nor with my son, nor with my son's son, but according to the kindness that I have done unto thee, thou shalt do unto me, and to the land whereunto thou hast sojourned. And so what he's got is in this case, I want you to kind of set up the story. You've got a friend. Now I'm going to put it in quotes because everybody pretends to be your friend, okay? So I'll just put it in quotes. Like I was telling the guys when we were dealing with some of the financial stuff, I said, you know what, I wanted to get to the point where we can, trust everyone with the finances. It's never going to be that way, but I wish we could. But I said, here's the thing. Every dishonest person is going to tell you they're honest. And I want to get the accountability here that even if a dishonest person were counting money, they still couldn't get away with it. We have that level of accountability where it's like, yes, you just walked away with $5 and I know it was you because here's the pattern and boom. But everybody who's dishonest is going to say, I'm honest. Everybody who's your enemy is going to tell you, I'm your friend. But also everyone who's your friend is going to tell you they're your friend too. So that's where I just say, we're just starting off with a guy who at least by everything we can tell is trying to be a friend. He's trying to be an ally. He's trying to be a companion. Is he or is he not? I don't know. We cannot see the heart. So we're just going to say, you're dealing with someone who at least on the face value here is saying, I want to be a friend. Okay? Now, what he does is he comes and he is basically saying, let's make an agreement. Okay? And this idea of an agreement is that idea of the covenant. Let's make an agreement with one another that we will deal a certain way with each other. We're not going to deceive each other. You're not here as a secret plant to backstab me. I don't know if you've ever studied those books on spycraft, and I remember hearing about a guy who he came up with a fake identity and he was pretending to be from a certain school, and he went to the language. I mean, he did everything, and he slipped into the country, and he's like, I really, really hope nobody questions, because actually there was no one of my name that was in the class that year, but it was the best cover we could come up with. And he came up with all of this carefully intricate plan on how he could infiltrate the states, and he had it all down. Okay. Now, what this guy's worried of is that idea where Abraham could be a plant to basically say, spy out the land, you're seeing what's here, and then when they're not paying attention, it's mine. I remember I was working at camp one time, and it was before I worked escape rooms, so I wasn't as into locks as I am now. But we had a lock, and just pro tip from a guy who ran escape rooms, master locks are not the best locks. I'm just saying. Like if you have master locks on your stuff, they're super easy to break. Anyway, so you had this master lock that was there on the door, which just basically kept honest people out. Let's just face it. That's why it was there. It was an honest person would look at it and go, I don't want to go through the trouble of trying to. No. A dishonest person, bolt cutters. I saw someone take a blowtorch one time. I have it in my office. They melted the entire lock out so they could get into it. Sometimes you just do the right pressure and you can pop those locks like nobody's business. But there was a dishonest person I met who wasn't a smart, dishonest person. And so what he did is he was working as a volunteer, and he just kind of gave off those vibes that you were like, I don't know why you're here. And he was just volunteering, but I knew for a fact the moment that when we were putting away games after a night game, he took up the lock like this, and it was still set to the code to unlock it. And he takes out his phone, and he goes, and he takes a picture of the lock on its combination. Like right there in front of me. Like we're packing up all the game supplies, and he's like, ha, ha, ha. And he looks at the lock, and he takes out his phone, and he goes, Flip. Now again, it was full of game supplies, so really there was nothing he could have stolen in the first place. But I sat back and I went, why did you just take a picture of my lock? Like why did you take a picture of my lock on the combination to unlock it? What possible motivation could you have, who doesn't work here, to have that combination? Well, it's because he was meaning to come back later and steal stuff. That's why. Either that, he was just immensely curious and he just really liked numbers, but most people aren't that way. And so that's what he did. So immediately after he left, because I think he was done volunteering the next day, we immediately went and changed every single lock on the property so that he didn't know any of the combinations anymore. But it was just weird. Like it was one of those things where he had been around us for like 2 weeks. He had been helping us for about 2 weeks. And he just, the last day, he's like, and you kind of go, was the whole reason you were volunteering was you were just spying us out? Is that it? Probably. And that happened. And so what have you got here is Abimelech and Abraham. They're there dealing with each other, and Abimelech's got a little bit of nervousness to go, Abraham, I don't know why you're here. Like, are you just spying things out? Are you, like we've been friends. We've been walking in close companionship for a while here. But let's just make some agreements with each other that you're not going to stab me in the back. You know? And here's what he does. Look at verse 22. He's like, let's make this agreement. Now, verse 23, he says, now, therefore, swear to me here by God. And so what he's doing is he's saying, hey, let's keep the audience of one the right one. If we're both in agreement that we're doing this to honor God, I think we'll be in agreement here. Swear to me by God that you're not going to betray me. Swear to me by God that you and your descendants will deal well with me. Now, you remember what Abraham did just a little bit before this to Abimelech? He lied about Sarah, and Abimelech took Sarah, and there was a bit of a confrontation there. And so they've already kind of had this, you've deceived me once. You've kind of betrayed me right off the get-go because you didn't trust me. So let's make some agreements. We'll swear by God, and we'll hold each other to this. So now you've got someone who is, in spite of a past conflict, still trying to make things right. In spite of a potential dishonesty, still trying to make things right. Now look what he does. He says, make this covenant, and look at verse 24. And Abraham said, I will swear. So what you've got is you've got a friend. Now again, I'm putting those in quotes because we don't know, but he's a friend, and he does turn out to be a really good friend. All right? We also see here that there is a covenant made. Okay? And we've got this idea of a covenant made. And what is this? This is an agreement. This is a promise. So this is why I use illustrations like marriage, because think about a covenant that you make when you get married. It is you saying to someone else in the audience of one, I will stay faithful to this covenant. I will stay faithful to you. I will keep my vow. Like, that's why this is a really good illustration, because think about it. If you're married, you probably have a lot of conflicts that have happened, if they're not happening right now. You've got an audience of one that you made a commitment before. Now, this is a problem that you're going to have to deal with because you made a commitment that you would stay faithful. You made a commitment that you would stick with it. That's how this plays in. So what you've got here is Abraham says, I will swear. But what he does is he is not going to let a problem fester. Okay? And so he's saying, I am not going to let a problem fester, because here's the idea. And I remember one time I got an infection on my leg, and I told you the story. And it starts out small. It started out as a little tiny cut. But over time, it got infected to the point that I had to go to the emergency room and have it dealt with, where it had to be, drained, and I had to get special soap to clean it just right. And there was all this stuff that went along with it. And it was this big, I thought I had been bitten by a brown recluse. Like, that was the level of this infection in my leg. It was insane. And literally, I was like, what is this? And they're like, oh, it's a staph infection. You got staph into your bloodstream, and now it's just spreading everywhere. And I was like, awesome. How did I do that? And like, probably an ingrown hair or something. And I was like, are you serious? They're like, yeah. Like, you get an ingrown hair, and you scratch at it, and you cut it, and then you got the staph into that ingrown hair, and before you know it, boom, you've got this infection running through your body that's super dangerous. Huh. Well, what do you know? And we use the language of festering. And if you've got a really bad wound, you understand the concept of what a festering wound can look like. It's nasty. But how did it start? It starts out as a little tiny cut, starts out as little ingrown hair, starts out a little scratch that you did wrong. I've been teaching through the immune system with my science class this past week. It is crazy to watch what the immune system does. It's insane. You talk about design and intricacy. It's fantastic. But the idea of a festering wound, we all understand that. And so what we're doing here is we're looking at Abraham and Abimelech, and they're assuming they're friends. There's some dishonesty that's happened, so there's some doubt, but hey, let's believe the best. They've made a covenant before God that they said, before God, we will keep this covenant with each other. And now what Abraham is doing is he's saying, the only way I can keep this agreement is if I deal with problems when they're small. So these little problems that we're having, let's deal with them now so they don't lead to a civil war. Think about it like that, okay? And so think about what a civil war is. It's little problem, little problem, little problem, people going different ways, and eventually by the time you turn around and you're like, we have to deal with this. You're this far apart. If you've dealt with them here, and maybe you won't be able to deal with them, but if you dealt with them here, you're a lot closer, and you're not having to deal with them here. All right, and that's what Abraham is doing. He's looking at Abimelech and he's saying, okay, since we've made this agreement, since we've covenanted together before God that we're going to do this, I got a problem with you, Abimelech. Let's deal with it. And so Abimelech almost walks into this one. Because Abraham, otherwise, he's like, I can just leave. Like, I can move away and you can be my enemy and I don't care. This land is mine. God already gave it to me. It's just waiting for him to finally give me it for real. I don't have to make this agreement. But Abraham goes, I don't need to needlessly fight. I don't have to have needless conflict in my life. I make this agreement. Now let's deal with the little things that aren't quite so little. All right, so let's look at this problem. All right, and it starts off, so they've sworn to each other, verse 25, and Abraham reproved Abimelech because of the well of water which Abimelech's servants had violently taken away. And so what have you got here? You've got a conflict that is actually a pretty bad conflict. You've got a conflict where Abimelech's servants took away one of Abraham's wells and apparently did it with some sort of fighting. This isn't good. This is a problem. All right? And so look what it says. Verse 26. And Abimelech said, I wot not who has done this thing. And what he's saying is, I didn't know. I don't know who did this. I know not who has done this thing. Neither didst thou tell me. Neither yet heard I about it, but today. And so look what Abraham's doing. He is confronting, but he is almost too late. Okay? It is almost too late. Okay? Why? Why is he almost too late? Because Abraham never dealt with it. He never dealt with it up until this point. He had a well that was violently taken away, and Abraham probably is thinking, hey, I'm a nomad. I'm traveling place to place. I don't care. We can move on to a different place then, whatever. And I mean, he's used to that. He's been doing that for the last 30 years. He just kind of migrates place to place. But now Abimelech's made an agreement with him, said, hey, let's deal peaceably with one another. Let's take care of each other and this and this. And so Abraham goes, okay, well, if we're going to make this work, then I got a serious problem with you that we need to make work. And he's rebuking him. Now again, it seems to be, in light of the covenant he just made, it seems to be, hey, if our families are going to get along, we're going to have to get along. I can't just run away and ignore this one. Because if every time I turn around and I build a new well, your family's coming in and taking away my well, I might be able to forgive it, but my family probably won't. We're going to have some pretty big issues. So Abimelech, if we're going to deal with this, we're going to have to deal with this right. Now again, audience of one, he's dealing with it to honor the Lord. Like, he made a covenant before God, and he's going to honor the Lord by keeping that covenant. And now he is striving for peace. And sometimes in your striving for peace, you are going to have to confront. And again, you want to do it in a spirit of meekness. You want to do it in a spirit of honesty. But here's some of the facts we need to come to. First question you need to ask is, am I right? All right? This is why I hate Facebook. All right? I'll just be honest with you. I don't use it too much. I do church stuff on there, but I don't do a whole lot with Facebook, and I rarely engage with people on Facebook because it's so full of garbage. I mean, I see things there, and I go, doubt it. It might be true, but I've been fooled too many times that I just look at Facebook, and I just assume everything Facebook has to tell me is a lie. It might not be. But I'm not about to start a war over what I read on Facebook because I've been duped so many times. I'm sorry, you might be perfectly correct with your fill in the blank, what you said. I don't know. And if it comes out to be true, well, second question is, can I do anything about it? Okay. Let's say there's a secret cabal of reptilians who are ruling the government. All right, cool. Yeah, I'm sure they live on the dark side of the moon and they have their skin, whatever. Cool. Can I do anything about it? Probably not. So I could definitely get worked up, but it's not going to help anything. I can't fix it. There's nothing I can do in that situation. And that's what people do. Like they share this stuff and they're like, look at the secret. And I'm like, could be. What are you going to do? I ran out of pitchforks last week, and I don't have any oil for my torch, so we can't burn down the monster's castle. I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do about it. But people just, they want to be part of something. So they're like, look at this crazy fill in the blank. Now, if you've been posting that, I don't know. I have not seen any of your posts. Please, don't be like, I just posted that last week. I even posted a picture of a pitchfork. I didn't know. Okay, this is the Lord convicting you because I did not see it. All right? But the question is, am I right? Like, am I dealing with the truth? If you are, okay, go on to the next step. Can I fix it? Can you fix it? Is there anything that you can do to fix that problem? Yes? Okay. Have you prayed about it? Have you prayed about it? Has this been something where you have gone back to the audience of one and said, this is going to be for God's glory? Or do you just want to start a fight? And you notice Abraham, what he's doing here is he's saying, I have just made a commitment before God that we and our families and our kids, we're going to get along. We're not going to deceive one another. We're not going to trick each other. I made that agreement. Am I right in that you stole the well? Yes. Can I fix it? Well, maybe. I can tell you about it, and it's your servants doing it, so let's see what we can do. Am I doing it to honor the audience of one? Well, God has put me in this land, and I'm going to honor him by being truthful. Now, we don't know that Abraham prayed about it. We don't see that side. But again, in our context, there are a lot of problems we can deal with by just praying. That's all we can do. Prayer is a powerful thing. We need to remember that. We need to go back to prayer. And so if truly the universe is run by reptilians who live on the dark side of the moon, then you better be praying that God hits that side of the moon with a meteor. I don't know. But the fact is, there's so much that we get worried about that we're like, literally, we can't do anything about it. So let it go. Yeah, it's just the way it is. But Abraham, in this case, he said, this is a problem I can fix. This is a problem I can address right here at the start of our relationship. And God has said that I need to honor these covenants I've made. So there's no point in me pulling out and saying, I'm done. No, I made a covenant. I made an agreement. I have to keep that covenant. Now, look at the next steps. So he confronts him. This is something that Abraham can solve. This is a problem that is real. This is something that is directly connected to Abraham and his responsibilities. So he confronts him, and look what Abimelech says. Abimelech, as a friend and as someone who he's made agreements with, says, I don't know who did this, and you didn't tell me about it. Again, instead of Abraham, and we don't see this in Abraham, but instead of Abraham going around and gossiping about everyone behind his back and saying, oh, look at the terrible person Abimelech is. He's sending his servants to destroy my wells. And he went right to the source and said, your servants are doing something. And Abimelech goes, I didn't know. You have any idea how much property I own? Do you have any idea how many wells I have? Do you think I know when somebody steals a well? Not unless someone tells me about it, and you lost your well, and we're friends, and you didn't tell me. And so look what he says. He says, I did not know about it until right now. Verse 27, and Abraham took sheep and oxen, and he gave them to Abimelech, and both of them made a covenant, and Abraham set 7 ewe lambs of the flocks off by themselves. And Abimelech said unto Abraham, what mean these 7 ewe lambs which you have set off by themselves? And he says, for these 7 ewe lambs you shall take by my hand, that there may be a witness against me that I have digged this well. And here's the idea. I don't know if you've ever read the old book. It's a missionary who was a missionary to a tribe. And this tribe, they made their living, and the heroes of the tribe were heroes if they could get you to trust them, and then they would betray you and eat you. And that was like the biggest heroes of the tribe were those who could get you to trust them long enough for them to kill and eat you. And this missionary went to this tribe, and he started telling them the stories of the Bible. And he came to the story of Judas, and he told the story about how Judas, who got into Jesus' trust, and then betrayed him and got him killed. And they were like, hey, that's our kind of guy. Wow, wow. And they were looking at Judas like a hero, because culturally, he got Jesus to trust him. And they were like, that guy's awesome. But then what he did is he's like, okay, we can't have them thinking Judas is the hero of this story. Culturally, though, they think that because, again, in their culture, betrayal is like the greatest attribute you could have. Okay, what do I do? And so he just started living around them and teaching them the scripture. And again, they thought Judas was a hero. And so as he started living, he noticed these two tribes make peace with each other. And he noticed that the two tribes would exchange a child so that a child of this tribe would go live here and the child of this tribe would go live there. And they would exchange a child as part of their agreement. And that would be a lasting peace between the tribes. And he goes, what is that? And he goes, oh, that's what we call a peace child. He's like, what is that? And he goes, it's a commitment that we will not betray them. So if they ever do anything that like harms that peace child, then we will do the same, and it'll be brutal war. But the idea is we are exchanging children, and we are giving a covenant to say we will be peaceful because, again, we don't want you to kill our peace child, and we're not going to touch yours, and we will keep the agreements between our tribes. And the book was called Peace Child because they discovered this commitment. He goes, okay, so what would happen if someone betrayed the peace child? So you've got this person living in the tribe, and as long as they're alive, they're a living symbol of the covenant. And he goes, what happens if you betray the peace child? They're like, oh, they're like the worst of the worst. Like so we love betrayal. Like don't get us wrong. We love the build up trust and backstab you and eat you thing. Like that's cool. But you do not touch the peace child. Like, that is the biggest taboo you could do. And that's where he's like, got it, okay. Judas betrayed the peace child. And that pivoted the whole narrative because he goes, there it is, right there. Judas, God sent Jesus as a peace child to us, and Judas betrayed him. And they're like, oh, he's scum. He's terrible. And what is this picture of? Abraham is basically sending all of these sheep over to Abimelech, and he's saying, every time you look at those sheep, you're going to remember the agreement we made. Every time those sheep show up in your pasture, and you go, oh, those are Abraham's sheep. I wonder how his well is doing. That's what it is. So I told you that story about the lock, the melted lock that somebody blowtorched. Okay, happened on day 1 of camp. So we are getting ready for camp. I had just swapped out a whole ton of ropes with new ones. We had moved all the old ropes because you have to retire them after so long. Hundreds of dollars worth of ropes. We don't have hundreds of dollars to spare. Hundreds of dollars of ropes. We move them out, and I get a call from one of the guys, and he says, hey, did you move all the ropes? I go, no. He goes, I think we've been robbed. And I go down, and somebody had taken a bolt cutter and snipped the chain. I was like, this is good. This is looking well. And I walked down to our little storage area, and I noticed the lock has been absolutely melted from the inside. Someone took a blowtorch, sneaked down, and went and melted it. I don't even know what they were going to do with all this stuff. Literally, they destroyed all this stuff, stole a bunch of harnesses and ropes, and I'm like, you can't take those to a pawn shop. No pawn shop's going to take them and be like, oh, cool, use climbing harnesses. Those are totally legit. Like, no, like you can't use them. They're junk. Nobody's going to trust a rope that you don't know the background of the rope. I'm not going to trust a rope that I don't know the background to. I don't go buy my climbing ropes at a pawn shop. I don't know where they've been. I don't know if they've been ground into the dirt. I can't trust them. So it was an absolutely useless theft. But the Lord protected us because a whole bunch of the spare ropes that I needed to run that summer, that I had decided to retire early, or at least they might have been fine and they were still usable, they hadn't been destroyed yet. We hadn't cut them up to use them for other things. And I had kept about 14 harnesses in a different location. So we had just enough harnesses to run the summer, just enough zip line stuff to run the summer, and just enough ropes. Now, could we run it perfectly? No. Could we have more than enough? Could we have enough that we didn't have to share? No. But we had just enough to keep as many activities running as possible. And I kept that lock as a reminder that there are times God allows us to be wronged, but he can limit the evil that's done. I mean, you think about the early church. What did they do? They took gladly the spoiling of their goods. That meant people were breaking in, stealing stuff, and walking away, and the Christians went, hey, I'm thankful God protected me farther. Hey, I'm thankful God gave me that stuff in the first place. Hey, I'm thankful. And I keep that burnt out lock as a reminder that at any time, God can lift that little layer of protection and say, I'm going to let bad things happen to you. And evil people will do evil things. And we never caught the guy who did it. I still have no idea. Doesn't matter. What are we going to do about it? He's a man who needs to hear the gospel. He's a man who needs to be told, why are you doing this? But again, I was right. I mean, he did steal my stuff. Could I fix it? Not really. So I just pray, hey, God, you take care of that one. And thank you for protecting me in this other area. But if I could have confronted and been like, hey, dude, come on. Can you give it back at least? I really need that climbing harness that I use to climb the trees because it's important to me. I need that stuff. Nope. And that's this idea where Abraham is saying, listen, we're going to put a little monument together. It's going to be a living monument. And it's going to remind you not to steal my stuff and remind me to tell you about it. And it's just an agreement that we have with each other. And it's just this beautiful little picture. And so look what happens. Verse 31, he says, and therefore they called the place Beersheba because they swear both of them. Thus they made a covenant at Beersheba. Abimelech rose up, and Philcol, the chief captain of his hosts, and they returned into the land of the Philistines. And Abraham planted a grove in Beersheba and called on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. And Abraham sojourneyed with the Philistine land, in the Philistine land many days. And so he made peace. So this conflict that could have led to a war or a fight, and Abraham could have won it. Here's the thing. It was Abraham's God-given land. He could have won that war. He beat Sodom. He beat all those other enemies. I don't think Abraham really had to worry. But he chose peace. Yes. And so the idea, I still remember my mom using the quote, like, you might be right, but you might also be dead right. Certain things that's like, I have the power to do this. And it's like, oh, yep, sure. But is it worth it? And there are things here where, am I right? Is the problem true? With Abimelech and that? Yes, the well actually was stolen. Can I fix it? In that case, yes. Audience of one. We're about to make a covenant before the Lord to be in agreement with each other. This is a problem we have to deal with. I can't leave this out. I can't neglect this. And then they chose to deal with the problem. And they dealt with it gently. They didn't deal with it with the violence and force and bringing art. No, he said, I'm going to give you a bunch of sheep. And every time you see those sheep, remember the covenant we've made. Did Abraham have to give him sheep? Did he have? No. It's just, let's have peace. And then we also, remembering the audience of one, we remember the protection God's given us. And if that protection gets lifted, we still remember the one who was protecting us and still is. Because God will allow things to happen, and we just have to stand back and say, for God's glory, I'm still going to deal with this well. So, all right. So that brings us to the end of Genesis 21. I'll show you a different conflict, Lord willing, next week, and we'll keep putting these pieces together. But I do want to open it up for questions before we close out.